year again, folks. Time to get into that Halloween spirit. I'm sure many of you out there have a movie or two that you always pop in to get yourself into the Halloween mood. Well, for me, that's a little film I like to call Ju-on the Grudge.
These are the Ju-on films. Also, for the record, these films are called Ju-on in Japan. America got 3 films in the series that are known as The Grudge. So, for simplicity's sake, I tend to call this series Ju-on the Grudge. And yeah, this is how many films there are. Chances are, if you live in America, you've ever only heard of these ones. Many of these films haven't been officially released here, which is a shame because I can honestly say this is the scariest franchise I have ever seen. I should also take this moment to point out that Ju-on the Grudge has nothing at all to do with Ringu the Ring. Although I can understand the confusion, the monsters are practically the same, pale-skinned ghosts with long black hair, and both were Japanese franchises before getting American releases. But the similarities stop there. They are 2 completely separate films, although I believe Ju-on is far scarier than The Ring. These films are mostly characterized by their small budgets. Many of them had very little to work with. In fact, a few of them were never even released theatrically. But I believe that adds so much to the films. It's the perfect blend of not getting too carried away with special effects and gore, while also not being coy about showing their monster. Another thing these films have in common is the non-linear way of storytelling. The story jumps from character to character, with a black screen with a name on the bottom letting us know who we're watching. This kind of filmmaking is very different than the traditional way, so on first viewing, it could be a little confusing. But I feel it's what separates Ju-on from other horror movies, and I applaud it for sticking to its methods. Ju-on the Grudge is the baby of Takashi Shimizu, who has directed nearly all of the films in the series. He has mastered a very rare kind of horror. To quote Wikipedia, he prefers to suggest menace and violence rather than directly depict it. And for the most part, that holds true. There's hardly any blood and gore throughout the entire series. Hell, we barely get to see where these bodies end up. But that just adds to the mystery of this curse. Which I suppose it's time to talk about. Most of these films follow the same curse, which is called Ju-on. Essentially, this curse is born when someone dies with intense rage that hasn't been resolved. The curse resides in wherever the person has died and will affect anyone who enters the cursed location. 90% of these films revolve around the Saki family. The story varies in certain details from movie to movie, but it generally remains similar. The husband Takeo, convinced that his wife Kayako is having an affair, brutally murders her and his son Toshio, before also killing himself. This left Kayako and Toshio as vengeful spirits who haunt the house and kill those who are unfortunate enough to enter. And boy do they ever. As there's one other part of the curse I haven't mentioned. It can spread from person to person. It's like the world's worst common cold. You enter the house, you have the curse. If you're not killed then, you go home to your husband or wife, now they have the curse. They go to work and talk to their friends, and now they have the curse, and the body count just gets countless. And there is no stopping it. If you have this curse, you're doomed. It's just a matter of when. In many traditional horror films, especially American ones, there's always a way to defeat the monster, to escape and live another day. This is not one of those movies. This curse is above human understanding. If Kayako targets you, you're done. Let's talk about Kayako. Kayako is downright horrifying. I have seen these films countless times for years now, and even still, I have to sleep with a light on every now and then because her image just haunts my mind. She is unstoppable and does not have to follow any rules to get to her target. In most slasher movies, when the heroes run down a hallway, you can expect the villain has to also run down that hallway to catch them. Kayako has no such restrictions. You run down that hallway, she can appear above you, below you, right in front of you. She's the most efficient killer I've ever seen. Sometimes even her victims become spirits as well, becoming yet another Ju-on curse for people to worry about. Toshio is there too, of course, though I consider him more of a warning. When the characters encounter Toshio, he is usually there just to scare them, or simply to stare, or even to fool them into coming closer. Toshio can appear as a regular, healthy child when he wants, which he uses to lure people inside for his mother. And when they encounter Kayako, it's over. You'll notice Toshio's unmistakable meow. That's due to Takio killing their family cat as well. Their souls have fused together. And Kayako's sound, well, don't even get me started. She makes this sound since Takio crushed her throat as he was killing her. Her vocal cords have shattered. Even Toshio is capable of speech, though he won't do it often. And the way she moves. Every movement is unnatural. Her arms and legs move in ways no human should be able to do. You can hear bones cracking with every move, her gaping jaw where that awful rattle sound comes out, and those enormous unblinking eyes. Kayako is portrayed by Takako Fuji in almost every film in the series, and seeing her in anything outside Ju-on, she seems like an incredibly sweet person. The difference is staggering. While I encourage anyone who enjoys horror to seek out these movies themselves, I realize that can be tricky due to the limited release in America. So I've decided to give a brief summary of each of the films in the series, while also giving my opinions of each one. The very first Ju-on-related anything came in the form of 2 short films, Karasumi, or In a Corner if you prefer, and 444444444. Yeah, that's the title. Which makes sense since the number 4 is a homophone of the Japanese character for death. You can see these shorts by getting the unrated extended director's cut of The Grudge. Yeah, it's all 3. Why not just say special edition? Anyway, In a Corner is a 3-minute short about 2 girls taking care of rabbits and then get taken out by Kayako. It's incredibly simple and has home movie quality, but that's only because it was a home movie. Even still, it's genuinely creepy and has the first ever appearance of Kayako. It's intriguing to see her essentially unchanged from her current look. Many Fours is also 3 minutes. It's about a boy who finds a ringing cell phone on the ground, with the number being all 4s. He answers it and is hunted by Toshio. The suspense is unreal. There's a solid minute of just silence, hearing the increasing wind, the dripping faucet. You know something's happening, you just don't know what. And to our surprise, it's Toshio. As a fan, it's great to see Toshio get a film all by himself, even if it's only a short. Both of these short films are excellent, and it's obvious to me why these were popular enough to expand upon. Next came Ju-on the Curse and its sequel, Ju-on the Curse 2. These are the actual Ju-ons 1 and 2. If you live in America, you probably know of these 2 films, as they're actually called 1 and 2 in this region. Well, imagine my surprise when I found out the films I loved so much were actually numbers 3 and 4. So again, this series can get really confusing, but that's why I'm making this video. As to where to find these 2 films, sadly, it's not so easy. I was basically ready to import them from Japan when I found this DVD on eBay. Naturally, I jumped on it on the spot, but I have found no other evidence of this DVD existing anywhere outside that eBay seller, despite the art perfectly matching that of the American releases. So I can only assume this is a custom-made DVD. So if you're listening right now and you made this, thank you very much. You've made this fan happy. These made-for-TV films are each an hour long and show us what would become Ju-on staples for the first time, including the house that would be featured in nearly all of them, Kayako's diary, and many, many kill scenarios that would be repeated in later films. There are a lot more characters this time around, like Toshio's teacher who arrives to his house to see why he's missed class. We also see the 3 characters from the short film here, living in the cursed house, explaining why they were being hunted in the first place. The video quality can be a little distracting for some, but the scares are still top-notch. This film also begins the trend of fantastic music. The soundtrack is great, even when nothing's going on in the scene. It's very Silent Hill, metallic sounds and deep-voiced choirs, mixed with noises that you can't even identify. There's one woman in the film that I like a lot. She knows exactly what this house is and does exactly what anyone should do and bolts out of there at top speed. How does she know what's going on? Well, that's explained in Ju-on the Curse 2, which mainly follows her and her family. This film's also an hour long, but really it's actually 45 minutes long, as the first half hour of this movie is the last half hour of the first movie. I know this is extremely low budget, but come on guys, you're better than that. There is new footage, of course, but even still, this film just feels like a compilation of scenes that were cut out of the first one, which is fine. I would have preferred an extended edition, but I can understand that not being possible at the time. That said, there are still some very scary moments here too. This family may have gotten the worst treatment of anyone Kayako's gotten her hands on. Though, there are some strange moments too, some of the weirdest things I've ever seen Kayako do. Maybe this was an experimental phase for her. The ending, though, is a serious highlight. A boy is being chased by Kayako in a school building. Here we see her power in action. Clearly he can outrun her, but she pops up at every corner, blocking his every move. And then, holy shit, things just get crazy. I have no idea, but it's amazing. Bottom line, these films are incredibly interesting, but unless you're really into this kind of thing, you could probably skip them, especially since they're so hard to find. Even still, they're incredibly important to the history of Ju-on, so I'm very happy I got to see them. Now for the main event, Ju-on and Ju-on 2, which we know are actually 3 and 4, but let's not get too confusing. I don't want to get into too much detail with these because I strongly recommend you see these two for yourself. They're fantastic, and you can easily find them on Amazon. Ju-on might very well be one of my favorite films of all time. But hey, that's a conversation for another time. We could talk about these films a little bit. This is where things really start to pick up. Due to the unexpected success of the first two films, this one got a theatrical release, and a higher budget for Ju-on standards at least. The first one mostly follows a social worker tasked to take care of the old house and discovering all the deaths that have occurred there. The kills in this one are out of control. Kayako has gone full force and creates some terrifying situations, including what is probably the most famous Ju-on kill, the under the bed scene. Ju-on 2 is surprisingly even scarier. It follows a pregnant woman named Kyoko who gets into a car accident which causes her to miscarry. However, later on, it seems she's not only still pregnant, the baby is perfectly healthy. Everyone's confused by this until we see Kyoko as a horror actress who was in a television program that took place in the house. And suddenly we all shiver as we understand exactly what has happened to that baby. I think both of these films are some of the finest examples of horror out there, and I strongly urge anyone who likes this kind of thing to check them out. Flash forward to 2009, Ju-on's 10th anniversary, and all of a sudden the 5th and 6th films of the franchise both appear back to back as White Ghost and Black Ghost. This is the first time Shimizu is not directing, however he does supervise the project, and it's generally considered the last Ju-on films the man himself has worked on. These are very bizarre films, however. Kayako is not even present, if you can believe it. These are completely different ghost stories. But there's nothing wrong with that, so long as the stories are decent, and, well, they're strange, to say the least. White Ghost is about a family who ends up in a horrible massacre, and their ghosts haunt the family's friends. Black Ghost is about a girl who is possessed by a Ju-on and has to get exorcised. Funny that these are the anniversary films because they stray so far from the Ju-on formula, and if you walk in expecting Ju-on glory, you might be disappointed. Black Ghost takes a very long time to get going, and the White Ghost has decent makeup, but you get used to her quickly, and the scares stop being as effective. What's really weird is that both ghosts make Kayako's sound. Why? None of these ghosts have their throats crushed like Kayako did. Well, anyway, these films have their moments, but they're definitely the least interesting in the series. Still, if this is what you're into, then check it out. Before we get to the final Ju-on movie, I want to give a brief mention to the American Grudge films, as they're an important piece of the series' history. And they're all, well, two of them anyway, are very good films, which is interesting as these two films are also directed by Shimizu. How often do you see an original director attached to a remake? And because of his magic touch, The Grudge is one of the greats of horror remakes. It stars Sarah Michelle Gellar and is similarly styled to the story of the first, third, Ju-on. However, there are minor changes here and there that are welcomed and makes it stand out on its own. The budget gets cranked up another notch, which is also a nice addition that allows more polished versions of our favorite kill scenes. The Grudge 2 is in the same vein, however, it is a direct sequel to the first Grudge rather than a remake of Ju-on 4. Oh god, this gets old. This one really shows the curse getting around, as the main character flies off to Tokyo and the curse still follows her. Like I said, once Kayako targets you, there's just nothing you can do. Well, I guess I should mention the Grudge 3, although I don't know why. It's not really in the same family. In fear of confusing American audiences, they changed this film to be much more traditional. Gone is the mystery and the unstoppable force, and now they attempt to explain things that were never meant to be explained. Oh boy, it's Kayako's sister, who's here to stop her. Give me a break. And oh look, bloody kill scenes! And this is in the 5-minute mark, letting you know immediately that this is not the same film you've grown to love by now. Even Kayako looks lackluster, I don't know. Maybe it's the shining brushed hair, or the crystal clean white makeup. She just seems too, Halloween costume? But whatever, I guess it's still an okay horror movie. I guess. But not a good Ju-on movie. And finally, we get to the latest film of the series. So new, in fact, I haven't a chance to get the DVD yet. Although, of course, I have seen it. Ju-on Beginning of the End came out in 2014 as a reboot to the franchise, ignoring what came before it. This is the first Ju-on film to have absolutely no involvement from Shimizu. Instead, directed by Masayuki Ochaie. I'm probably botching that. With another budget boost, suddenly Ju-on is looking really good. I was terrified at the idea of seeing Kayako in this kind of quality. And as far as I see it, it's pretty good. Sort of a love letter to those who have stuck around for this long. They repeat a lot of the deaths we've seen a dozen times now, but add a twist to catch us off guard. Oh, here comes the stairs scene again. She's gonna start coming down any minute, and oh my god, she's on the ceiling. Uh-oh, here comes the bed scene. She's gonna be under the bed, and oh, hey, it's Toshio this time. Actually, there's a lot more attention given to Toshio this time. An interesting choice, given he's usually been sidelined for Kayako's mischief. Hopefully this film gets a widespread DVD release, because even if you're not a Ju-on fan, I think this stands out on its own. So what's the future of the Ju-on franchise? Well, actually one more movie's been announced to be released later this year. A sequel to the last one called Ju-on The Final. Yeah, you heard that right. This one is planned to be the final installment of the series. That does make me a bit sad, but how often do you hear a horror movie franchise deciding to end like that, rather than going on and on and on until it becomes stale? I think it's a nice way to end on a high note, although, really, who knows if it's really the end. So that's every movie that I wanted to talk about. I know I've kept you here for a long time, and I really thank you for listening. I just wanted to share what I think is a massively underappreciated horror franchise, and something that any fan of horror movies at all would love. However, there's one more piece of Ju-on media I'd like to show you. It had a big part of me becoming a fan, even though it's kind of a strange one. Yeah, there was a Ju-on video game for the Wii. I don't even know how I came across this thing. I'm actually told it's pretty hard to find now. But I was a big horror gamer back then, as I am now, so that must have been what sparked my interest. But come on, Haunted House Simulator? What's that got to do with Ju-on? That sounds like a completely different game. But yeah, in fact, this is the very first Ju-on related thing I ever experienced. And it's fucking terrible. Well, okay, it looks decent enough. The scares in it are actually pretty terrifying. Kayako looks great, but there is one fatal flaw that kills the entire game. The movement speed. You move so fucking slow in this game. And you have this flashlight that goes through batteries faster than a Game Boy. You can collect batteries to refill it, but sometimes you move so slow, the flashlight dies before you can get to it. And if your flashlight dies, it's game over. It is some serious garbage. But really, I owe a lot to this game. It introduced me to one of my favorite movies of all time, and even inspired me to make a film. Yeah, in high school, I made my own Ju-on film. It's pretty silly, and I basically copied kills from the video game, but it's part of my history as a filmmaker. So Ju-on had a part in inspiring me to go to film school and learn how to make movies. I owe a lot to this franchise and a lot to Shimizu, so thank you for making Ju-on, thank you all for watching, and happy Halloween.
Hey guys, me again. I know this was a long one to sit through, and there was a lot less comedy than usual, but thank you so much for making it this far. I had a great time making this video. I'd like to make more like this in the future, so if you enjoyed, let me know, and if not, I'll go back, of course, to the crazy movies that I usually do. I already know what I'm doing next month, so stay tuned. And funny enough, at the time of making this end card video, Ju-on the Final has been released, so maybe I'll revisit this sometime soon. Until then, we have some other things to show you. You can check out my last video if you haven't seen it. It's about Tammy and the T-Rex. That's a crazy film. Or you can head over to Bloop Troop. They're playing Castlevania right now, and that's thematically relevant. We also got a couple more Halloween surprises for the next few days, so get ready for that. Once again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.